In the exercise files folder, you'll find the CRUD application and the SID application, and a folder called SQL that includes these files. These three files contain the definitions and the data for these three databases, the album, test, and world databases. And let's go ahead and take a look at the databases themselves. The world database contains this country table, which has a lot of information on 239 different countries around the world. And it has a city table with over 4,000 rows of data on over 4,000 different cities in different countries and districts around the world. So this is a lot of fun, and it's very useful for working with some larger amounts of data. The album database includes albums and tracks from a few different albums, and this is the database that's used by the CRUD application that we'll be using in the course and is also included in the exercise files. Finally, the test database includes a simple customer sales database, not a lot of data in it, but it's useful for inserting and deleting and testing silly test data. Most of the SQL that we show here in this course is what I call platform agnostic SQL wherever possible. That means that the examples here will generally work no matter what DBMS you're using. Of course, there are significant differences between database management systems. So there will be differences, and there will be some code that will need to change in order to work on something other than MySQL. The examples here are demonstrated with the MySQL database management system, but the knowledge should apply to any SQL database management system. I've created this interface called SID for use with the exercises, for demonstrating and for experimenting with the examples that I showed during the course. SID requires MySQL, PHP, and a web server, typically Apache, which are all available for Windows, Mac OS X, Linux, and most other operating systems. For Windows and Mac OS X environments, I suggest the XAMPP platform, which has all the necessary modules installed. And it's easy to install, and there's a movie here in the course showing you how to install it both on Windows and on Mac OS X. Most Linux installations already have the required packages already. SQL is a technical topic, and whenever you're dealing with a technical topic, it's a good idea to agree on the terminology involved in the discussion. I'll cover some of the more general terms here in this movie, and I'll cover more specific terms as they come up. Also, at the end of each movie, you'll find a slide recapping terms covered in that movie. A database is a store of tables, and tables are made up of rows and columns. DBMS is a database management system. This is the software package that manages the data in the database. The DBMS stores, retrieves, searches, updates, and deletes data in the database. It also typically controls access to the data. A DBMS may be used directly by users or may be used programmatically by another computer program that requires the use of a database. SQL is structured query language. SQL is a language for interacting with a DBMS. It's by far the most popular language used for this purpose. SQL is used both by users and by programs to interface with the DBMS. For example, here is a query in SQL, and this query retrieves the name, continent, and capital of countries and cities from a world database. A database is usually segregated into tables. Each table has its own configuration and usually carries its own class of data. For example, a country table or an album table. This is an example of a country table. You can see it carries information about countries. And this is an example of an album table that carries information about record albums. Tables are typically organized in rows and columns. A row usually represents all the information in a given record of data. For example, for a given country in the country table, a single row would have the name, continent, and region for that single country. For an album in the album table, a single row would have information about the title, artist, and label for a particular album. A column represents all like items across multiple rows. For example, in the country database, the name column has the names of all the countries in the database. The continent column has the names of all the continents in the database. In the album table, the title column has the names of all of the titles, and the artist column has all the artists across all the rows of the table. Columns are sometimes called fields, a more general term that applies also to non-relational databases. Likewise, rows are sometimes called records, and an individual item of data is sometimes called a cell. A cell is one place in a table that can hold one value. It is one column in one row. CRUD stands for Create, Read, Update, Delete, the basic 4 functions of a database application. The CRUD application that is distributed with this course is an application that creates, reads, updates, and deletes album and track information from the album database. These are the major terms that will be used during this course. More specific terms will be covered in individual lessons as they come up along the way. Also, at the end of each movie, you'll find a slide recapping terms used in that movie. SQL is a language for describing and operating on relational databases. What is a relational database? A relational database is a database that's capable of representing relationships between different sets of data. For example, a database may have a table of customers and a table of addresses. A single customer may have more than one address. Also, a single address may be used for more than one customer. A relational database has facilities for handling these relationships, and SQL was designed to use these features. SQL is commonly used in 2 contexts. SQL can be used to directly control the database management system, to enter data, query results, or to otherwise manipulate the database. For example, if you have a database that's used by an application, say to manage customers and addresses, and you need a report that's not provided by the application, you may type SQL statements directly into your database management system. This would give you the results that you need without having to modify the application program. SQL is also commonly used by a program to perform operations on the database as part of an overall application. For example, your customer management program actually uses SQL to communicate with the database, and the programmers who wrote the program put SQL statements in the code along with the programming language used to create the logic and flow of the application. You'll see examples of this later in the course when I show you the CRUD application.